I often say that life before phones and the internet does not feel like distant history. When I close my eyes, it returns clearly, almost gently, as if it never truly left. Our town was small, quiet, and familiar. Every street had a name, every house had a story, and every face meant something. We lived without hurry, not because life was easier, but because time moved differently. Mornings began with natural sounds. Birds on the roof, a radio playing softly from the kitchen, the smell of fresh bread drifting through open windows. There were no screens glowing in our hands, no messages waiting to be answered. The day started when we were ready for it, not when something demanded our attention. People talked more then. Conversations were slow, thoughtful, and often unplanned. You met neighbors on the street and stopped to speak, sometimes for minutes, sometimes for an hour. No one checked the time. Listening mattered. Silence was comfortable, not something to escape. We did not know we were living in a time that would later be called the good old days. To us, it was simply life. Ordinary, sometimes difficult, but honest. We made plans and trusted each other to keep them. If someone said they would come, they came. And if they were late, you waited. Looking back now, I understand that those days shaped us quietly. They taught us patience, presence, and the value of simple moments. And perhaps that is why, even after all these years, the past still feels so close. The slot. A single envelope could change the mood of an entire day. Words written by hand carried weight. You could feel the time someone spent choosing them. Evenings belonged to families and friends. Supper was shared at the table, not carried away to separate rooms. Stories were told, often repeated, but never boring. Someone would remember a detail differently, and the discussion would begin again, friendly and warm. Radios played familiar songs, and sometimes we sang along, a little off-key, without embarrassment. There was a sense of being known, not just by close friends, but by the town itself. People noticed when you were absent. They asked how you were and waited for the answer. Life had fewer choices, perhaps, but more certainty. You knew where you belonged. Only now do I realize how rare that feeling has become. Back then, we didn't search for connection. It surrounded us quietly, like the air, steady and unseen. And we breathed it without thinking, believing it would always be there. Weekends felt longer then, as if time itself decided to rest. Saturday mornings were reserved for small tasks that brought quiet satisfaction. Someone washed the car by hand, someone repaired a fence, someone simply swept the yard while thinking about nothing in particular. These simple actions grounded us. They reminded us that life was built from small, steady efforts. On Sundays, the town slowed almost completely. Streets were calm, shops stayed closed, and families dressed a little better than usual. Some went to church, others visited relatives, carrying homemade food wrapped carefully in cloth. Visits were never rushed. You sat, you talked, you drank tea, and if the conversation grew quiet, no one felt the need to fill the space. Entertainment was shared, not consumed alone. A television might bring neighbors together for a favorite program, or someone would play cards at the kitchen table. Laughter came easily, often from the simplest jokes. We did not expect to be constantly amused. Being together was enough. Young people dreamed, of course. We talked about leaving, seeing bigger cities, living different lives. But even those dreams were gentle. We believed there was time for everything. No one felt pressed to become something overnight. Growing up happened slowly, naturally, like seasons changing. Now, when I think back, I understand how safe those years felt. Not perfect, but steady. The world had its troubles, yet they seemed distant, manageable. We trusted tomorrow because yesterday had been kind. And perhaps that trust, once so natural, is what we miss the most today. Love, when it arrived, did not announce itself loudly. It grew quietly, through shared moments and familiar routines. You noticed it in small ways, a longer glance, a conversation that continued even when there was nothing important to say, the comfort of walking beside someone without needing words. We did not rush to define our feelings. We let them settle, trusting time to clarify what the heart already knew. Courtship was simple and sincere. A walk after supper, a visit on Sunday afternoon, a bouquet of flowers chosen carefully, not expensively. You met families early, sat at the same table, learned each other's habits. Love was not hidden behind screens or messages. It was visible, honest, sometimes awkward, but always real. Arguments happened, of course, but they were spoken aloud, face to face. There was no disappearing, no silence used as punishment. When something mattered, you said it. When you were wrong, you learned to admit it. Pride existed, but patience usually won. Evenings together were quiet pleasures. Sitting on a bench, watching the sun sink behind familiar rooftops, holding hands simply because it felt right. No one needed proof of happiness. There were no photos taken for others to see, only memories carried forward. Looking back now, I realize how deeply we trusted each other. Love was not a performance. It was a commitment built day by day, strengthened by presence. And though years have passed, that kind of love still lives within those who remember how gently it once began. Years passed, quietly and steadily, the way they used to then. Love turned into partnership, partnership into family, and family into a life filled with shared memories. Nothing dramatic marked the passage of time. It was measured instead by worn kitchen tables, familiar songs on the radio, and the changing faces in old photographs kept in drawers. We grew older together without noticing it much. Wrinkles appeared, hair turned gray, but the voices remained recognizable, comforting. The world outside changed faster than we expected. New machines, new habits, new ways of living arrived one by one. And suddenly, life no longer waited. It rushed forward, asking everyone to keep up. Sometimes, sitting quietly in the evening, I think about those earlier days. Not with sadness, but with gratitude. We were present for our lives. We looked at each other when we spoke. We waited. We remembered. We belonged. I see younger generations now, always connected, yet often alone. I do not blame them. Every time has its own rhythm. But I wish they could feel, just once, what it was like when love grew slowly, when silence was peaceful, and when a simple moment could last forever. Those days are gone, yes, but they are not lost. They live in stories, in habits, in the way some of us still pause before answering, still write things down, still believe that time shared is the greatest gift. And as long as we remember, the past remains alive, not behind us, but gently within us.